I stood in the industrial-sized kitchen, the scent of expensive catered food lingering in the air, while a dense layer of pearlescent soap suds covered my hands. Just beyond the swinging door, the sound of crystal-clear laughter and the tinkling of champagne glasses drifted down from the ballroom. They were enjoying their exclusive evening, an evening in my house, and to them I was utterly invisible, just another hired hand. Little did this glittering assembly of high society know that the man who owned this entire magnificent estate was my husband, and I was about to serve them the most humbling, and perhaps the most expensive lesson of their lives. If you have ever felt dismissed, overlooked, or judged solely by your perceived status, this chronicle of hypocrisy and revelation will undoubtedly resonate deeply. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell, because moments like these powerfully remind us that the surface level is rarely the whole truth. Now, let's dive into the evening that changed everything. My name is Aaliyah, and 2 years ago I married Logan. He is known globally as the quiet billionaire tech entrepreneur, the self-made man who engineered his sprawling empire from a tiny dorm room and sheer willpower. What the public doesn't grasp, however, is that underneath the Titan facade, he remains the most genuinely kind, compassionate, and stubbornly down-to-earth person you could ever hope to meet. Perhaps that shared refusal to engage in the theatrics of wealth is precisely why we connected so instantly. Our first meeting was entirely unremarkable. A small, unassuming coffee shop downtown, where he was simply another guy hunched over a laptop, wrestling with code. Logan never felt the need to flaunt his immense fortune, and neither did I. Even after our wedding, I deliberately kept my life private, shunning the society pages and gala circuit. While Logan managed board meetings and major philanthropic endeavors, I was perfectly content dedicating my time to the local animal shelter, doing demanding, fulfilling work away from the blinding glare of cameras and reporters. It was the simple, authentic life we both cherished. But tonight, that simplicity was momentarily suspended. Tonight was the annual charity gala, a grand event hosted right here in our mansion, meticulously planned by Logan for months. Every dollar raised would go to support several major children's hospitals across the state, a cause deeply personal to him. The irony of the situation was almost palpable. Hundreds of the city's wealthiest elites were currently convening in our home, yet almost none of them knew who I was. That realization sparked an idea, a mischievous curiosity, or perhaps a necessary social experiment. I needed to know how these supposedly generous, refined people truly behaved when they believed they were beyond the scrutiny of anyone who mattered. My decision was swift and somewhat absurd. I would attend the gala, but not as Logan's wife. I would infiltrate the event disguised as one of the temporary catering staff. I know it sounds reckless, but consider the opportunity. How often do we get a clean, unfiltered look at a person's true character? I slipped into a standard black uniform borrowed from our household staff, efficiently pulled my long hair into a tight, utilitarian bun, and practiced the kind of professionally detached, invisible server smile required for the role. Crucially, Logan was delayed by a critical, last-minute business meeting overseas, ensuring he had no clue about my audacious plan. It was perfect timing. The physical transformation was startlingly effective. With minimal makeup, hair severely constrained, and the generic uniform, I was instantly rendered anonymous. I navigated the maze of hallways and entered the frantic, high-pressure environment of the kitchen via the service entrance. The actual catering team, overwhelmed by the volume of prep work, barely glanced my way. I was just another face, another body to fill a role. As the first waves of distinguished guests began to arrive, I grabbed a heavy tray loaded with delicate champagne flutes and made my entry into the main ballroom. The sight was breathtaking, even though I had witnessed the setup process all week. Massive crystal chandeliers showered the polished marble floors in a liquid, warm light, illuminating towering floral arrangements on every surface. For a brief, proud moment, I felt a deep satisfaction that this magnificent space was our sanctuary. But that warmth evaporated quickly. Moving through the densely packed crowd, offering liquid gold to outstretched hands, I began to catalog the microaggressions of entitlement. The way certain people's eyes would pass straight through me, as if I were transparent or stationary furniture. the absolute lack of acknowledgement as they plucked a glass from my tray, seamlessly continuing their vapid conversations without the slightest break in rhythm. "Excuse me, miss," a sharp voice cut through the background hum. It belonged to a woman named Catherine, instantly recognizable from glossy society pages, currently squeezed into a fire engine red gown that seemed designed to demand attention. "This champagne is too warm. Can't you people manage to do anything right?" she demanded, her tone dripping with casual contempt. I offered my practiced, apologetic smile, biting back a retort, and offered to fetch a fresh, colder glass. She simply rolled her eyes and dismissed me with a flick of her wrist, already deep into her conversation with a neighboring couple. I retreated, reminding myself, this was precisely the behavior I had come to witness. Yet Catherine was merely the opening act. The real spectacle began with the grand entrance of Priscilla. She was the self-appointed queen bee of the city's entire charity circuit, and tonight's meticulous orchestration was her claim to fame. Tall and imperious, likely in her late 50s, she wore a rigid gold gown that probably cost more than the annual tuition for several universities combined. She possessed the unnerving ability to look down on people in a way that made you feel physically small, about 2 inches tall, perhaps. And unfortunately, she had zeroed in on me. "You there," she barked, her voice booming slightly, pointing a long, perfectly manicured finger in my direction. "What is your name?" "Aaliyah," I replied, keeping my voice low, steady, and respectfully submissive. "Well, Aaliyah, I sincerely hope you are significantly more competent than the rest of this amateur staff. Do you see how painfully slow the passage of these appetizers is? It is absolutely unacceptable. This is a genuinely high-class event, not some suburban backyard barbecue." I gave a simple nod and offered a generic assurance that I would work diligently. But Priscilla was far from finished. For the next exhausting hour, she relentlessly manufactured fault with everything I attempted. The specific angle at which I carried the heavy tray, the pace at which I approached guests, even the way I stood motionless while waiting for instruction. It became abundantly clear that she was deriving perverse pleasure from having a tangible subordinate to verbally abuse. The other guests quickly took their cue from the alpha. If the esteemed Priscilla treated the service staff as little more than drones, then clearly that was the standard, acceptable behavior. I watched, fascinated and disgusted, as seemingly well-educated, supposedly refined people seamlessly transitioned into entitled bullies the instant they believed no important witness was observing their conduct. "This shrimp is stone cold," griped a heavy-set man in a tailor-made suit that screamed 5 figures. "Can't you people understand the basic principles of keeping food warm? I am not paying good money to be served frigid appetizers." My immediate impulse was to inform him that he, in fact, was paying nothing. The entire event was a donation platform. But I held my tongue. Instead, I offered a sincere apology and proposed to replace his plate instantly. He snatched the fresh one from my hands without making eye contact or offering the merest grunt of thanks. As the evening wore on, the casual mistreatment escalated into something uglier. Guests would interrupt my serving attempts mid-sentence. They would share condescending jokes about the staff's assumed lack of intelligence, confident that people like us couldn't possibly grasp their sophisticated humor. A few even made casually cruel remarks about how the servers should be eternally grateful to have such decent, if menial, work. The breaking point arrived when one of the actual servers called in sick at the last possible minute. Priscilla, already stressed, became livid and desperately needed someone to cover the heavy kitchen duties. Guess who she chose? "Aaliyah," she declared, her tone non-negotiable. "You are going to have to report back and help with the dishes. We are severely short-staffed, and someone needs to ensure the kitchen runs smoothly." I stopped dead, staring at her, momentarily paralyzed as I processed the demand. Here I was, in the palatial dining room of my own home, being commanded to scrub dishes by a woman who had zero authority over me. I was explicitly hired to serve, I stated carefully, keeping my voice even, not to perform dishwashing duties. Priscilla's eyes narrowed into slits of pure malice. "Listen here, sweetheart. You will do exactly whatever I instruct you to do. This is a highly professional event, and I refused to tolerate some temporary, part-time server questioning my authority. Now, get back to that kitchen and start cleaning, or you can find yourself another job instantly. The small bubble of conversation immediately around us popped. Several nearby guests ceased their mingling to observe the brewing confrontation. I could feel their collective gaze on me, a mixture of amusement and awkward anticipation. No one offered to intervene. I took a single, deep, steadying breath. Then I turned and walked toward the kitchen. Not because I was intimidated, but because the sociologist in me wanted to push the boundaries of this experiment. I needed to see precisely how far this display of effortless cruelty would extend when these people felt absolutely secure in their entitlement. The kitchen was a shocking mess, a battlefield of discarded food and porcelain. Plates were piled precariously high in the basin, and the industrial dishwasher groaned under its non-stop load. I rolled up the sleeves of the borrowed uniform and began scrubbing, the harsh reality of hot water and industrial soap quickly making my hands raw. Through the narrow service window, I could clearly see the guests, laughing, drinking, and dancing, completely oblivious to the frantic, grueling labor necessary to maintain the illusion of their perfect evening. But Priscilla was not done. She kept making punitive return visits to the kitchen, finding fresh ways to assert her dominance. She criticized my dishwashing technique, complained incessantly about the speed of service, and delivered snide, veiled comments about my ability to handle real work. You know, she drawled during one particularly aggressive visit, leaning against the doorway with her arms crossed. I have been expertly organizing events like this for 20 years. I can spot the potential troublemakers from a mile away. You have a terrible attitude problem, and that simply will not work in this business. I continued scrubbing plates, allowing her words to wash over me, inert, like the foamy water. She had zero comprehension that she was talking to the lady of the house, the person who had personally approved every linen choice and floral arrangement for this event, the woman who could have her blacklisted from every major charity function in the city with a single, short phone call. The ultimate test of my self-control came when Catherine, the woman in the aggressive red dress, decided to join Priscilla for a moment of shared mockery. She was clearly slightly drunk and aggressively bold. "Oh, this is rich," she cackled, pointing at me as I struggled with a greasy serving platter. "Look at little Miss Server, relegated to dish duty. I bet you never imagined you'd be reduced to this when you woke up this morning. Did you?" I slowly looked up at her, my hands still suspended in the cloudy, soapy water. "Actually," I replied calmly, deliberately slowing my movements, "I find honest, hard work quite fulfilling." Catherine's perfectly made-up face twisted into an expression of utter disdain. "Honest work? Is that honestly what you choose to call this? Sweetheart, this isn't honest work. This is what people are forced to do when they lack any viable alternatives. This is what people do when they are not quite smart enough or simply not polished enough to successfully do anything else that truly matters." Her words struck me with the force of a physical impact. Not because they hurt me personally, but because I realized she sincerely believed every syllable she was uttering. She truly thought that a person's intrinsic worth was entirely quantifiable by their job title or the size of their portfolio. "Do you know what I think?" Catherine pressed on, emboldened by my silence, leaning closer to deliver the final insult. "I think you're likely some college dropout who couldn't cut it in the real world. I bet you're living paycheck to paycheck, struggling to afford a decent apartment. People like you, darling, are a dime a dozen." Priscilla laughed, a loud, dry sound, and nodded vigorous agreement. "She's absolutely correct. I've watched hundreds of girls exactly like you cycle in and out of this business. No ambition, no inherent drive, certainly no future. This is likely the best employment you will ever secure." I stood there, droplets of dishwater staining the black uniform, and in that instant, I made a definitive decision. The experiment was over. I was finished being treated like dirt in my own home. I was done watching these privileged guests gleefully expose the ugly core of their character. But before I could speak a single word of revelation, a familiar voice, deep and resonant, cut through the din of the ballroom. "Excuse me," Logan called out, his voice close yet edged with confusion. "Has anyone here seen my wife? I'm looking specifically for Aaliyah." My heart vaulted into my throat. Logan was here. Priscilla and Catherine exchanged rapid, confused glances. They had no idea what was happening, but they instinctively sensed that the atmosphere had shifted irreversibly. "Your wife?" Priscilla called out tentatively, stepping toward the kitchen doorway leading to the ballroom. "Sir, I don't know what you are referring to. There is no one here by that name, save for one of the temporary servers." I heard Logan's powerful footsteps drawing closer, and I knew the charade was about to collapse. I quickly dried my raw hands on a thick towel and turned to face Catherine and Priscilla, whose faces were now portraits of increasing bewilderment. "Actually," I said, my voice now calm, steady, and carrying a new, deliberate authority, "there is someone here by that name." Logan appeared in the kitchen doorway. His eyes immediately locked onto mine, traveling from my face down to the black uniform and the damp towel in my hand. For a moment, his handsome features registered pure, profound confusion. "Aaliyah?" he asked, his voice laced with concern and shock. "What in the world are you doing in the kitchen? Why are you dressed like this?" I offered my husband a genuine, soft smile, the man who commanded global markets but still looked at me as if I were the most precious thing in his existence. "Hello, darling. I was simply getting to know our guests a little bit better." The realization struck Logan like a physical bolt of lightning. His expression instantly morphed from confusion to perfect understanding, then crystallized into a barely restrained, cold fury. He turned his gaze toward Priscilla and Catherine, who were standing frozen, their faces turning waxen. "Let me be absolutely clear," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet pitch. "You two have had my wife washing dishes in our own kitchen." Priscilla's skin went utterly white. "Your wife? But she's just a server." She insisted she was part of the catering staff. "No," Logan stated firmly, taking 2 steps toward me and carefully enveloping my soapy hands in his. "She is Aaliyah Morrison, my wife of 2 years, and the co-owner of this mansion. Furthermore, she is one of the kindest, most intelligent women you will ever have the opportunity to meet, though I strongly suspect you have already completely missed that opportunity." The silence in the kitchen became so heavy it was physically suffocating. Catherine's complexion had transitioned from bright red to a pale, sickly green, and Priscilla looked as though she was moments from fainting entirely. I could hear the background hum of ballroom conversation rapidly dying down as other guests sensed the magnitude of the unfolding drama. Logan gently guided me toward the doorway, then turned to address the quickly growing crowd of curious onlookers. "Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to formally introduce you to my wife, Aaliyah. She decided tonight to experience our event from a rather unique perspective. And I think, collectively, we have all just learned something profoundly valuable about ourselves." The crowd instinctively parted as Logan led me into the full illumination of the ballroom, still holding my raw, red hands. I could see the dawning recognition sweeping across face after face. The woman they had just ignored, dismissed, or outright humiliated was the mistress of the house. Aaliyah wanted to personally observe how our esteemed guests would treat someone they perceived to be beneath their station. Logan continued, his voice carrying clearly across the silent ballroom. "I am profoundly disappointed to inform you that many of you failed that simple human test, and you failed it spectacularly." Priscilla stumbled forward, desperation etched onto her features. "Mr. Morrison, I swear I had no idea. If I had known who she was, I would never have. I was simply trying to keep the event running smoothly." "Exactly," I said, finally seizing my voice and projecting it across the room. I stepped away from Logan and faced Priscilla directly. "You treated me horribly precisely because you believed I was just a server. But here is the critical point, Priscilla. I was just a server tonight. The only difference is that I possess the privilege of choice. The woman who would have been forced to wash those mountains of dishes if I hadn't stepped in deserves the exact same level of inherent respect you would begrudgingly give me now." Catherine attempted a panicked retreat into the crowd, but Logan's voice, sharp and authoritative, stopped her cold. "Catherine, I believe you had a few highly informed opinions about people like my wife, referencing college dropouts and individuals lacking ambition. For the record, Aaliyah holds a master's degree in social work from Harvard University, and she chooses to volunteer at an animal shelter because she believes in making a tangible difference in the world, not just writing large checks. The visible shame on Catherine's face was almost painful, but Logan wasn't finished with his delivery of consequences. Furthermore, that business deal your husband has been aggressively attempting to negotiate with my company? Logan stated, looking directly at Catherine. Consider it irrevocably cancelled. We strongly prefer to conduct business only with people who genuinely share our fundamental values of decency and respect. The ripple effect was instant and profound. Other guests who had been casually rude or dismissive toward me throughout the evening began to visibly panic, suddenly recognizing that their anonymous cruelties might carry significant consequences. Some rushed forward with immediate, verbose apologies, but the profound damage had been done. I want every person in this room to understand something clearly, I said, addressing the room, my voice steady and unwavering. The way you treated me tonight is indicative of how you treat people every single day. Your server at a restaurant, your housekeeper, your doorman. They all deserve the exact same respect you would afford to anyone else. Their job title does not, under any circumstance, make them less valuable as complex human beings. Logan squeezed my hand gently, offering silent support. The charity we are supporting tonight aids children who come from every conceivable background. Some of their parents might very well be servers, dishwashers, or cleaners. How can we possibly claim to support these children while simultaneously looking down on the very families raising them? The entire evening took on a dramatically different, somber tone after that. Several guests, too embarrassed or furious to remain, discreetly slipped out early. Others approached me later with what seemed to be genuine, deeply felt apologies, and I could tell they were truly contemplating their behavior for the first time. A small number even shared their own stories of times they had been unfairly judged or treated poorly based on appearance or employment. Priscilla's powerful position as the preferred event organizer for the charity circuit collapsed almost overnight. Word travels with lethal speed in those exclusive social spheres, and her reputation never recovered from that night. Catherine's husband's business experienced significant losses when other major firms, following Logan's decisive lead, determined they wanted no association with that particular brand of arrogant entitlement. But the most meaningful change was witnessed in the people who genuinely absorbed the lesson. I received dozens of letters in the following weeks from guests who confessed the experience had prompted them to completely rethink how they interacted with service workers. Some even started volunteering at local charities, working elbow to elbow with people they might have previously viewed with quiet condescension. As for me, I too walked away with a profound realization. I learned that my privileged status carries a serious responsibility. I learned that sometimes, to effect genuine change, you must be willing to step entirely out of your luxurious comfort zone. And I learned that the most devastating, powerful weapon against casual prejudice is simply forcing people to observe their own repulsive behavior reflected back at them with absolute clarity. The following morning, Logan and I sat peacefully in our massive kitchen, drinking coffee and quietly reading the news coverage of the event. The story had exploded, taking on a life of its own, with people worldwide sharing their own painful experiences of being judged by their appearance or job title. "Do you regret it at all?" Logan asked, looking at me seriously over the rim of his coffee cup. I considered the long, frustrating hours of the previous night. "No," I said finally, meeting his gaze. "I regret that it was necessary, but I absolutely do not regret doing it. Those people desperately needed to see themselves clearly, and sometimes the only way to facilitate that is to hold up an unflinching mirror." Logan smiled, reaching across the table to gently take my hand. "I am exceptionally proud of you, Aaliyah. You could have revealed your identity the very moment someone was rude. You could have instantly used your position to avoid all the discomfort and humiliation, but you chose instead to fully experience what millions of ordinary people endure every single day. That is the true essence of privilege. It's not just about accumulating money or status. It is fundamentally about possessing choices. I had the absolute choice to walk away from that steaming kitchen whenever I desired. I had the choice to reveal my identity and stop the mistreatment immediately. Most people working service jobs do not have that essential choice. This entire story stands as a powerful reminder that we genuinely never know who we are interacting with. Treat every person you encounter with consistent kindness and profound respect, because you simply never know when karma, or a billionaire's wife, might come calling. If this story resonated deeply with you, please smash that like button. Share this essential message with someone who needs to hear it today. And don't forget to subscribe for more incredible, thought-provoking true stories. What would you have done had you been in Aaliyah's position that night? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.